Well, welcome back to Life Groups. We're continuing on in this whole series of Walking Dead, and specifically today talking about potential. So if you're here this last weekend or you watched it online, this will feel like a recap, but if not, this is going to kind of catch you up. So I wanted to remind you about the memory verse for this weekend, Matthew 16:15 through 16. It says, "But what about you," he asked. "Who do you say I am?" And Simon Peter answered, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." You see, the big idea is how I live my life will determine the legacy I leave behind. So I need to consider who Jesus is in my life. If Jesus is anyone to me besides the Messiah, my potential is limited and will always come up short. You see, one way or another, my legacy will either make Jesus more famous or infamous. It's really up to how you and I seek after who Jesus is in our lives and stop relying on our own power and really begin to rely on our potential, on our God potential that is spoken into each one of us. But I need to realize that potential is almost always revealed through relationship. God already has in mind all that could be yours and my potential and is constantly wanting to pull it out of me. But you and I need to give him the venue in which he can actually do this. Because when I do start giving him this place in my life, and when you do it, it will allow each of us to convert our potential into our legacy. You see, legacy is not what people think of you after you die. It's what you leave behind that changes the world. So am I living a life that uses my full God potential to impact a dying and lifeless world? I want to ask this question. If you had to write your own obituary, what would it say? So discuss that, all right? And we'll come back and ask another question. So I want you to think about this next question. In Acts 2:38 through 41, Peter recognizes how his potential had turned into the legacy that Jesus called him to. Now, Peter is in no way flawless and was messy just like you and I are. So what is the potential that you have that you are not walking in? Go ahead and discuss this question.
I must say, I'm just super excited to spend time with you guys today because of the content. The content of our time together is at the very core of who we are as a church and who we're called to be as Christians, Christ followers. Today, we're going to be looking at the life-giving commission that we are all given in Matthew 28:19 through 20. Now, let's take a moment to look at this verse in the context of the larger account of Matthew 28:16 through 20 in order to really understand the scene and the intentional call to action that was given to the disciples to proclaim all over the known world. I mean, this is really quite a scene. Jesus, in his resurrected body, coming before the disciples. And many Bible scholars agree that the mountain is or near Mount Tabor, where the transfiguration of Christ actually occurred. So here they are, post-resurrection, listening for their marching orders. And they totally get them. So the disciples were commanded to go out and make disciples of all nations. And then all authority had been given to Jesus, and now he poured out his authority through his Spirit into his messengers. And he paved the way for salvation for all of us because of the sin he bore on the cross. And that God the Father had placed all authority under his sin-conquering Son. And his first command was that his disciples spread his mercy and love beyond the borders of Israel. Jesus instructed the disciples to go first to Galilee. He had appeared to them just as he said he would in Jerusalem and then on a mountain in Galilee, yet still some doubted, right? But these disciples would not doubt for long. Pentecost is only weeks away, and the disciples' resolve was strengthening with every visit from Jesus. And the power of God was sweeping them up in his love, like to propel them to obey his great commission, to carry his good news to the ends of the earth. So here's your first question. Here's what I want you guys to talk about. How do the following words, all authority or all nations, and I will be with you always, challenge any limits that you place on yourself, you place them on yourselves in obeying the Great Commission? Go ahead and talk about that for a few minutes. So here's question number 2. How does the fact that Jesus will be with me always to the very end of the age help us to overcome our fears? So discuss that, our fears and overcoming them. Now that you guys have discussed some of these questions, let's dig into the instruction that's given. In verse 20, it says this, teaching them to observe all things. Now, this teaching is not with words only, but with the power of the always present Jesus. He will be present with his people until the job of making disciples is done, until the end of the age, as he calls it, but through the person and the power of the Holy Spirit. The content of his teaching should be walked out in the lives that we have the opportunity to live. You see, the followers of Jesus are responsible to present the whole counsel of God to those who really don't know the gospel. And Jesus sent his disciples with a mission to fulfill. He did not send them alone. The promise of his constant presence was more than enough to strengthen and guide the disciples as they obeyed Jesus in making disciples of all the nations on the earth. And his presence means privilege because we work with a great king, the Messiah, the Redeemer. Paul, the apostle, he understood this in principle well in 1 Corinthians 3:9, where he wrote, "For we are God's fellow workers. Since Jesus promised, 'I am with you always,' then we work together with him in all of our service." And we certainly work for Jesus, but more than that, we work with Jesus. His presence means protection because we're never out of his sight or his supervision. And his presence means power because as we fulfill this great command, we work in his name. And his presence means peace because it always reminds us that the church belongs to Jesus. It's his church and it's his work. So here's your next question. In what ways can I concretely obey Jesus' final charge to all of his followers? Go ahead and discuss that question. it's super important to be able to apply this big idea to minute by minute and hour by hour and day by day living. That's why the Great Commission is at the core of who we actually are as a church, and really should be at the core of who we are as Christ followers. And Newbreak has 5 core values that are essential to a thriving spiritual life and fulfilling the Great Commission. And the values are participating in a worship experience, then being in a life group, and then participating in outreaches, and then developing generosity, and then serving in a ministry. And at Newbreak, we're really about bringing the gospel to people. That's why our vision is to be in communities, loving communities, and shaking those communities for Jesus. You see, when Jesus walked the earth, he said some pretty radical statements that really shook the planet for the people living at that time. And not only did he say these things, but he acted on them as well. You see, the Great Commission is an encouraging charge for all of us, no matter who we are, to live a radical life filled with faith, hope, and love in the midst of a world that's broken and desperately needs to hear it. And we strive really not just to talk the talk, but to walk the walk, which is why we're so committed to shaking the planet as a church like Jesus did. And we do this locally and globally by working to eradicate sickness and human trafficking while simultaneously promoting aid for the poor and then kingdom development, which includes church planting and then, of course, education. So here's your next question. In what ways can I go and obey Jesus' final charge to all his followers this week? Like discuss the name of the person, the place, or other area of opportunity that you can be praying to put the Great Commission into practice. Go ahead and discuss that. Today, we talked about one of the things nearest and dearest to my heart, which is the Great Commission, and how we all, as believers, have a part in fulfilling this in our relationship with Him. So as a group, take a moment to think about an outreach or a way that you can really fulfill the Great Commission as a life group, like as a spiritual community. And as you close, I want your facilitator to close in a time of prayer. And I want to challenge you to continue really dreaming of new ways to serve others and make yourself available to like the natural ministry opportunities that release the gospel throughout the world. And feel free to email us at lifegroups@newbreak.org or outreach@newbreak.org if you have any questions at all about outreaches and stuff. And it's really a privilege shaking the planet and serving alongside of you guys. So have an incredible, incredible coming week. God bless you.